What's up everybody, it's Jaron from Berkshire Bike and Board, and in this short video, I am going to teach you how to adjust the saddle height on your bicycle. Why is that important? Well, it's important for a few reasons. Number one, we want to be comfortable when we're riding our bicycles, and comfort has a lot to do with your seat and what height it's set at. The other thing is we want to try and prevent some injury and allow us to ride our bicycles comfortably for a long time. What do you need to set up your saddle height? Well, the first thing you need is a set of Allen keys. Generally, your seat post clamp, which is right here, is tightened and loosened by some Allen keys, so I like to have those. I don't have my iPhone in my pocket, but you're gonna need an iPhone for a few things. Number one, to take some video, and number two, to use as a level on your seat. And number three, you're gonna need a tape measure for two reasons. Number one, to measure your saddle height, and number two, to work as a plumb bob for the angle of your knee. So, how does this go wrong? It goes wrong in a couple ways. Number one, your seat can be too low. Now, a lot of beginners have their seat set up too low because it's easier to get on and off their bicycle and it builds a little bit of confidence, and that's all right for a little while when you're getting started. As you start to get a couple rides in though, you're gonna wanna get your seat set to the accurate height, because if your seat's too low consistently, it's gonna create some pain in your knee. You start to put too much torque on your knee, and that is not good for riding over the long term. The second way you can mess this up is you put your seat too high. Now, it's not that common, but we do see it at the bike shop sometimes, and what that does is, if your seat is too high, then you're gonna stretch or overextend to get to the bottom of your pedal stroke, and your hips are gonna go like this. Jaron, why does it matter if my hips go like that? Well, what's gonna happen is if your hips are going like that, that means your butt is moving on top of your seat. What does that do? That makes your bib shorts or your bike shorts rub against your skin, and that creates saddle sores. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're lucky. I promise you, you don't want to get a saddle sore, so set your seat height up accurately. How do you do it? I'm going to show you right now. There's two methods to setting your seat height up accurately. The first method is often called the Le Mans method. I don't personally like it because it's awkward at the bike shop, but I'm going to show you how to do it. It works well to get a basic height for your seat that you can then make some smaller adjustments off of. So, the Le Mans adjustment, how do I do it? I take a book. I stick the book between my legs, right up into my crotch, I'll call it. This is why I don't like doing it at the bike shop with customers, because it's weird. I then stand against a wall, like this. I make sure the book is level, I make sure it's high and tight, if you will. I take a pen, and I mark my spot. Next thing I do, I take my tape measure. We like centimeters at the bike shop. From the floor, all the way to my mark, 87 centimeters. Now, I take the Le Mans method number, which is 0.833, and I multiply it by my inseam, which is 87 centimeters. Hey Siri, what is 87 centimeters times 0.833?
I found this on the web.
Didn't work. I'm gonna do it manually. 87 centimeters times 0.833 equals 72.5 centimeters. Let's start with that. So, what do? I have my tape measure, I have my Allen keys. I come over to the bicycle. This is a seat post clamp that holds my seat post into the frame from going up and down. I'm gonna loosen that baby up a little bit here. It's nice if you keep it snug enough so that you can move it, but it holds itself in place. How's my butt look? It's a key detail. This is 71 and a half. So I'm gonna go up a little bit. I'm gonna make sure it's straight. I'm gonna try it again. I'm measuring from the center of my bottom bracket, where my crank bolt goes through the bottom of my frame, to the top of my seat post. Again, 72.5, ding, ding, ding. I got my mark, I'm gonna tighten it down now. I should use a torque wrench, or you should use a torque wrench. If I break this, I know a guy. Yeah, always use a torque wrench, especially when tightening down things that hold carbon together, because you'll crack it and then you'll have a bad day. So, I've set my basic seat height up using the Le Mans method. Again, it's not my preferred method for a lot of reasons. I feel like it leaves a lot of room for error, but it's a good starting point. You know what's another good starting point? Stand next to your bicycle. If your saddle is pretty close to your hip, you're probably off to a good start. Okay, I'm on the bike. I'm in the hoods. I'm pedaling. I can tell you right now that my seat is a little bit low. Again, it starts to become a bit of a personal preference thing at this point, but if you can see, as I'm pedaling, my leg isn't really extending that much. I don't necessarily want this, but I also don't want this. It's too bent. So I'm gonna make a few adjustments to try to bring that up a little bit. And to do that, I'm gonna show you the other method, which is called the heel to pedal method. Heel to pedal method, how do we do it? First thing we do is this. I've got my basic setup started. I'm gonna unclip. I'm gonna put my pedal so it's at its lowest setting. I like to use my dominant foot for this because it's easier. I hold myself upright and I rest my heel on my pedal. And right away I can see that my leg is bent. For this heel measurement, we actually want our leg completely straight because by the time we clip in, it's gonna keep our knee slightly bent when it's at the bottom of the pedal stroke. So, what do? I raise the seat height up a little bit. How do I do it? I use an Allen key. I back off the pressure a little bit. I bring this baby up. We'll give that a shot. I snug it down. I hop back on. I hang my heel. Boom. I'm about fully straight. So now we start to refine things. I'm close enough where I feel confident that it's gonna be okay on a ride. So now I'm gonna clip in and try it. I've been riding bikes a long time, so I can kind of go by feel a little bit. This feels, give or take, about exactly where I run it. If I'm being honest, it's actually a little lower than where I run it, so I'm gonna get it back to where I like it perfectly, and then I'll lock it in place. Again, this is still a tiny bit short. You can see my leg's not fully extended. Let me raise it up a little bit too high for a second so you can see what I'm talking about as far as my hips rocking. How's my butt look?
A little narrow.
As you can see, at the bottom of the pedal stroke, I have to really extend my leg. What's that doing? Making my butt look good. Besides that, my hips have to rotate a little bit. What's gonna happen? There's friction here. That's gonna cause a saddle sore. If you don't know what a saddle sore is, you're lucky. Fine tuning. This is where years of experience come into play. I bet you that's perfect. What do you know? This is about where I run my saddle. Actually, hang on, fast forward. That's the wrong way. I did something stupid. I go through a lot of bikes here at the bike shop because I work at a bike shop, and so I'm able to ride different bikes all the time. Every time I get a bike, I get my saddle set where I'm happy with it, and then I forget to mark it, and then I let a bunch of people ride my bike because that's also part of my job. And so then I'm doing this back and forth thing at some point. We're gonna break some ground here, and I'm gonna take my own saddle height measurement so I know it moving forward. This is a good tip and something I recommend to everybody to do. The other thing you can do is you can mark it right here with a little bit of Sharpie, or common practice is people take an X-Acto knife blade and they just make a little etch in their seat post so they know where to set it if somebody else rides their bike. Let me test this. Oh yeah. Okay, that's more like it. That's where I wanna be. Good leg extension, not too much, right? Things are comfortable, I feel good. I'm ready to go rip it. So that's the basics of your seat height setup. There's two more components to this, and that's the angle of your saddle and the forward and backwards. Let's do the angle first. So this is where I like to use an iPhone. Okay, how do you figure out if your saddle's level? I like to start everyone off with their saddle level, and then we can adjust it up or down based on comfort. One thing to note, which is super important, is if you tilt it back, it brings your hip back a little bit. That generally relieves some pressure off your arms and your wrist, but it can cause some problems sometimes in the undercarriage area. It's a technical term. The other way you can adjust your saddle is forward at a more of a downward angle. That rotates your hips forwards a little bit, puts a little bit more pressure on your arms and your wrists, which I personally don't like, but sometimes relieves a little bit of pressure here, which is good for the undercarriage. It's a really personal thing. It's hard to really make recommendations here because everyone's body is different. It's something I'd recommend experimenting with. But I would also recommend taking some baselines. So right now, my saddle is gonna be negative a few degrees generally. I use the iPhone. I'm sitting at about -4 degrees. It's not a perfect measurement because I'm using a phone and it's not a very long distance, but if you do it the same way with your iPhone every time, it does work. How do I adjust it? Hold on, we're gonna fast forward for a second here. It's complicated. First, the one thing I'll say about this is everyone's saddle is generally different. There's not like a standard about how these seat post bolts stay tight or loose, so I'm just gonna not give a ton of advice and just say basically these are often called the guts of your seat post, and what you need to do is loosen these up a little bit first. This particular seat post doesn't have the ability to just like rotate in place. I have to do it with basically a set bolt that's on the top. I'm gonna bring it back to level just for the sake of this video. Pick your poison on this one, experiment with it, see what you like, run with that. That's a 0 offset, you know, 0 angle. I'm not gonna get too deep into this because again, it feels like it's maybe a different video, but some basics are my saddle's level. That's a good starting point. The last part of this, which is a little bit more fun, is your saddle being forward or backward. Depends a little bit on the bike, but the general nature is that you want your knee to be directly over the spindle of your pedal when you're at a 3 o'clock and a 6 o'clock riding position. How do I do that? I use my tape measure again. I hop on the bike, I clip in, I rotate to 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock pedal position. I grab my tape measure. I set the top of my tape measure directly in front of my kneecap, and I hang it down next to my foot. As you can see, where this tape measure hangs is right about in the center of my pedal spindle. That's the general rule of thumb of where you want to set this up as a baseline. Some people like to move their saddle back a little bit. That brings the plumb bob back down your foot a little bit. There's some advantages and disadvantages to that. In the other direction, you know, people slide their saddle forward a little bit. You'll generally see that on like a more racy style setup where, like, you know, there's a big drop from their seat down to their handlebars, so they're very aggressive. The saddle is tilted down. They're way off the front of the bike like this. It's super aerodynamic, but I'll tell you this from experience, it's hard on the neck. It's a hard angle to have your head up when you're super crouched down like this. Generally starts to cause a lot of discomfort in your arms. So we generally preach kind of a baseline setup, which is, again, that knee directly over the pedal spindle when you're at 3 and 6 o'clock, and it's a good starting point. So, it's a fairly long video. There's a lot of details in there. The focus or the point of this video is to get your saddle height right. Once you get that, remember that number and then play around with it, right? If you've watched this video, you know how to make small adjustments at this point, and I would encourage you all to make some adjustments, see how it works, and go from there. So, if you like this kind of content, you can hit the subscribe button. It really helps out the YouTube channel. Like I always say, round up for distance, round up for time. Thanks for watching.